A very good afternoon to all our registrants, all our viewers out there, all our online people watching us today to another Lunch and Learn session. And today we will be discussing how to interpret the documents presented during a inquiry. That could be a Section 6 inquiry, or it could be a Section 10 maintenance inquiry. So today what we will be discussing, if I can just make that a little bit bigger. Yes, today we will be discussing an in-depth explanation on how do you interpret the documents. These documents that we ask for, or the maintenance officer asks for in court, the banking statements, the financials, the income and expenditure. How do we scrutinize that? How do we work through that? We will also be discussing the expenses, how to investigate the expenses, how to scrutinize and go step by step through every single line item of expenses and how to scrutinize that to see if that is a necessary expense. We will also be discussing some questions that, tips on questions that could be usually asked. And we will be addressing how to use the financial disclosure form. Now, that is a form that is not commonly used in our court system. It's mostly used in the Gauteng region, mostly part of divorces. But in the Western Cape, Advocate Recourses is advocating that we use that in maintenance inquiries. And I've been using that quite extensively, and it works like a charm, and it works beautifully. And we will be addressing some of those issues. We will also give you some insight and tips on how to establish, how to formulate your case, how to do the cross-examination when it comes to scrutinization of all the documents that were submitted, because we know that all these documents might seem heavy, and what they talk about, court bundles, and they talk about all these big things that you have to present. And for a lay person going to court, it is quite daunting because you do not know what to expect and how to deal with those type of issues. Just some logistics. You have received those that have registered for the Lunch and Learn sessions on our website, www.lunchandlearn.org.za. You would have received a link, and that link would bring you to a web page that would include the live streaming, or you could stream it either on our website. We've got also all over social media on our website. It's on our Facebook pages. There's 2 Facebook pages that we stream to, as well as our YouTube channel. So if you're registered, please, I encourage people to register, that you would have access to more information. You would have access to some pre-reading material. If there's any pre-reading material in this webinar, there is no pre-reading material, but you would have access to pre-reading material, as well as the course handout, as well as the course slides, which you could download then for future reference, or if you want to go back there and just make certain that you've heard everything and that you know what is going on. So jumping right into it. So the whole concept of scrutinization is there would be certain documents that is submitted to court, and that is used for the financial inquiry, because the Act is quite clear that in order to establish the reasonable means of both mother and father, documents need to be submitted to court so that the court could make an informed decision on what amount of maintenance would be fair and equitable for the children in question. So what documents are we talking about? First of all, we talk about, and these are all documents that either you would submit, or that it would be required that you submit the documents, or that the respondent, with other words, the father, would have to submit. Now, usually what happens is that in the first instance, in the Section 6 inquiry, that is the informal inquiry done in the maintenance officer's office, the father or you would be requested to submit certain documents. Now, practice has shown us that this could be a lengthy process in order to get the respondent to get all the details, and the case will be remanded forever and ever and ever, up until a stage that all the documents are presented to the maintenance officer to make an informed decision. And if the parties cannot agree at that stage, then transfer it to court. And then all the process does not necessarily start all over again, but by that time that the matter goes to court in terms of a Section 10, a time period have lapsed. So the details that you've submitted to court might not be accurate. There might be a 6-month delay in order for you from the Section 6 inquiry to the Section 10 inquiry to get to court. So then it would be wise and it would be advisable to submit supplementary affidavits and supplementary documentation so that the court, when they deal with the issue of the income and the expenditure of both parties, that they have up-to-date information. So what documents are we talking about? First of all, obviously the salary slip. Now that is the first point of departure. That is the income of the respondent. If he does have a salary slip, yes, ask for at least 3 or 4 salary slips and be cognizant that, remember now, bonuses also gets paid out at least once a year. So you want to cover that as well. So keep that in mind because we'll get back to that at a later stage. Obviously, then the banking statements. We found in practice that most often the respondent would only give a certain bank account, but not all the banking accounts. Remember that you still have the remedy in terms of the sections of the Maintenance Act, where you can subpoena, or the maintenance investigator on instruction of the maintenance officer could subpoena the banks to get all the instruments, the financial instruments, i.e. the banking statements of the respondent, in order to scrutinize that for the maintenance inquiry. Things that are also important is the pension fund of the respondent. Get the details of the pension fund, and then we'll address that at a later stage or during the course of this webinar, how you can actually ask for those either in the Section 6 or the Section 10 inquiry. And investments, yeah, that is also important because the dad might have investments from a bank. And that would speak to the possibility of attaching those type of instruments at a later stage for either future maintenance or for the enforcement of a maintenance order, should that be necessary. So if you have that information ready right in the beginning, right beforehand, and you know that, you know what, somewhere down the line, the respondent has a investment of a couple of thousand or 100,000 rand, which is sitting in a Discovery Bank investment or whatever. That is an attachable asset that you could use when there is non-compliance of the maintenance order. Also important to note is to have some kind of an idea of the asset base of the respondent. So why is that important? Things like vehicles, for example, or property, because there's case law that specifically says that any means should be taken into account, and means would also include investments, and it could also include property that could be realized into money in order to pay maintenance. Those are just all the income side of what needs to be scrutinized. On the other side, you would have the expenses. Obviously, the deductions on the salary slip, which is very straightforward if one looks at it, because there's certain deductions that needs to be made in terms of the pension fund, for example, in terms of SARS, income tax, that needs to be scrutinized. Now, do not accept a payslip that has been redacted. And what I mean by that is a payslip that has been drawn on, or some information has been omitted or drawn out or crossed out. You want the original payslip in order to see that that is an authenticated payslip that the respondent would receive. Things also to look out for is the payments of the UIF. Obviously, we've mentioned the SARS, and it would also be well within your rights to ask for an IRP5 document to see what amounts has he paid over to SARS during certain periods or previous periods, in order to establish that he does earn an income and that he does pay taxes to SARS. Also important, and that's something that is quite often overlooked, is the skills development levy. Now, that is a 1% levy that is also deducted in terms of legislation from the salary slip. I had a case where the salary, the amount was actually redacted and it was crossed out, but the skills development levy was not crossed out. So that was actually a very easy calculation to make, because the skills development levy amounts to 1% of the total income of the respondent. So we could just backtrack that and make a reverse calculation. We could establish what was the correct amount that was given as income towards the respondent's employer. Also important, and that's why I marked it as assets, to see, what things like car payments, that would be a deduction. So if the respondent does own a vehicle, there would at some stage on one of the documents or one of the banking statements, there would be a deduction for a car payment. So bear that in mind, that, you know what, that's why it's also important to have the asset base in mind, so that you can see and you can link those two up to see, but you know what, he says that, yeah, he does have a car as an asset, but there's no deduction on a banking statement. So where does the money come from? So bear that in mind, as well as car insurance, rates and taxes, and also repairs for homes and alterations of homes as well. That could all amount to certain deductions that would be scrutinized. Obviously, as part of the expenses, there would also be luxury items, and we'll go through that once we go through the banking statement. Now, remember that most of the income, like I said here, the most of the income on the one side and the expenses on the other side has been filled in either the J101 form or the J107 form. You would have, when you approach the court, you would have brought that application, so you would have filled that in. So make certain that the numbers tie up. Make certain that if you claim on your J101 form, if you go for, if it's a first-time application or an alteration or variation, in terms of using the J107 form, that the numbers tie up. If you say that there's a vehicle asset of 10,000 Rand or 100,000 Rand towards a vehicle, that you have proof thereof. On the other side, if you pay off the vehicle and you pay off and you make the alleged or the statement that you pay off 5,000 Rand towards a motor vehicle, that amount specifically reflects on the J107 form, which corresponds with your banking statement, because you will be cross-examined on this. Remember that just as you brought your application to court for a first application using the J101 form or the variation thereof in terms of the J107 form that's been filled in, you would have completed these documents, and you would have the attorney for the respondent would have the opportunity to cross-examine you on some of the details that you have submitted. So make sure that the numbers, the amounts correlate and do add up. Lastly, I just want to make brief mention of the financial disclosure form or the financial disclosure affidavit. Now, that's an affidavit, and we'll get into that into a couple of minutes. That is a document that has been prepared by, I don't know who, people up in Gauteng, and they use it mostly in the Rule 43 or the Rule 58 interim maintenance applications, the interlocutory maintenance applications that they've done, usually during the process of a divorce. Now, we have adapted that form to, and they've been using it quite successfully, and we've been adapting that form, Advocate Raiders have been adapting that form to use that in maintenance matters in the Western Cape. And where that has been used, it was quite phenomenal. Because that is a full disclosure of all the financials of both parties. So that would basically mean that you can compare apples to apples. And in terms of Section 15, where the Act speaks of a fair and equitable distribution or calculation of maintenance, the court would be in a situation where they could actually make an informed judgment comparing apples to apples once both parties have submitted all their financials. But we'll get into that in a couple of minutes. So how do we interpret the documents? First of all, obviously, the banking statement. Now, linking up with a banking statement, and we'll go through that and I'll explain that in a while, why I would like, or what I prefer in what I do in practice, is that I take the banking statements of my client and I would go through it line by line. Now, a banking statement tells the whole story. It's just not like a banking statement that you just submit to court. I've been to courts where they just ask, the maintenance office just ask for the banking statements, but they don't have an idea. They don't have an inkling on how to interpret that. And they just, because that's just run of the mill, they have to ask for it. So now the banking statement is on file, but they never look at that. The banking statement, once you do a financial inquiry, tells a whole different story. It does not only tell you about the income and the expenditure of the person, but it tells you how that money is spent, what behavioral pattern leads to spending. It could also show geographical proportions on where that money was spent and why that money was spent. And those are all questions that you could use during cross-examination. And I'll go through that in a while. So if we look at a banking statement, for example, like I have on the screen, this is just a normal banking statement. If I can just go to that statement, then I can show you exactly what I mean. On that one, there it is. Now, these banking statements could be from any bank. It could be from FNB. It could basically be any bank that is used. So I'm using the FNB bank as an example, and most of the details have been redacted in order to protect the identity of the people of who this pertains to. So normally what would happen is you would see a graph. Now, this graph is not the alpha and the omega of everything. I see a lot of maintenance officers actually depend heavily on what is written here in order to make an established, informed decision. And it's not an established or an informed decision, because this only speaks to the linking of the credit providers or the service providers to where you make the payment. So if you would use your credit card in order to pay for petrol, then that would link up as petrol. But otherwise, you know what, they would just all dump it under retail, and that is actually not the correct way of interpreting this. That's why I said, and I make mention, and I'll show it to you in a moment, why I scrutinize the banking statement first, and then I delve into each and every line item thereof. So going through the banking statement, you can see it's a quite recent banking statement. Make sure that you have the original banking statements. Do not accept just the internet printed ones, because those could be altered very easily. I've seen that in practice quite a lot, where people just submit the document, and then once you actually go into detail with regards to that, and then you realize, but you know what, that is actually a bogus document that was submitted. So insist on the original one, or if it's one that has been printed out, you want the banking stamp on there as well. So this is just what a normal banking statement looks like. Like I said, it's a credit card. This person submitted the credit card as proof of his income and expenses. So if we go through some of the line items, and this is just how I scrutinize some of these items. Yeah, you could see, okay, right, there were some deductions or payments made to Checkers in Somerset West. That could probably be food. And this is just to scrutinize through this whole banking statement, just as a first glance. There you would see COCT, which is quite strange, an amount. So that is an amount that surely you could query. FLM, that is the Food Lovers Market, that's obviously money. Then there's Optic Edge, which is quite a large amount. That should raise a red flag. And then you would see, okay, right, obviously on the J101 or the J107, and you would know where the respondent resides. So you know that this person resides in the Helderberg area. So he lives either in Strand, Somerset West, or Gordons Bay. But all of a sudden, there is different deductions from a different portion or part of South Africa. So all of a sudden it skips from Somerset West, Gordons Bay, it jumps to Camps Bay, Cape Town, Camps Bay, Waterfront. So something happened during this period of time. So this tells a whole story. Geographically, the expenditure has moved to a different portion of the country. So something happened here, and that is something that you could investigate, but because it might very well be that the respondent went on a weekend away. So who did he go with? Why was it necessary? That is all things that you could ask during a cross-examination. Just going through during the banking statement, here you can see, for example, I'm just looking at the large expenses. Duraclad paints, obviously, that could be cross-examined. Why was it necessary? Who was it done for? Flameros, that is a eatery. Copper Kettle, that's a eatery. Pick and Pay, these are all Joey's, that's a butchery. Quick Spa, these are all. So these are all the expenses. Yeah, you can see there's Netflix as well. super spa, those are all expenses. Things that you should watch out for, things like eBay, for example, because that speaks to luxuries that might have been bought, online shopping. So that's definitely something that you have to bear in mind. Keep that in mind, because you could cross-examine the person on the necessary or the necessity of that type of expense. Same with take a lot, for example. There's a big amount of take a lot. Why was it necessary? What was it for? And then you would look at things like the income. What was the income on the banking statement? So yeah, you can say, okay, right, there's an internet banking that came through for 9,000 Rand, and then another payment of 30,000 Rand, and then another one of 5,000 Rand. So the question would be is, if you look at that, where did that income derive from? Because remember now, in order for any expense to be paid out, there needs to be money that needs to come in. So there should be money coming in. And I find it very strange, especially if this was the only banking statement that was submitted. Why was it specific amounts of 30,000 Rand? Why was it specific amounts of 9,000 Rand? That should sound an alarm bell, because that is not an amount paid in for income. So if the respondent then said, but his income was 39,000 Rand or 30,000 Rand, where did the other money come from? And that is something that you could question. You could ask the respondent, where did that money come from? Those are all things that is just the banking statement. So my suggestion would be to go through that line by line. And if you're not sure on how to use that, or how to scrutinize that, then ask the court. You will know what you would like to have some time in order to go through that, if you do not have that in time or immediately. In most instances, you would not have that information up until probably a day or two before the court. And that is wrong, because that would mean that you did not have enough time to prepare for that. So next, what I would do is I would use a Excel spreadsheet. Very similar to this. If I can just make that a little bit bigger so that you can see, I would use an Excel spreadsheet, and that is based on the banking statement, and I would split it up. I would split that up. I have to do my homework beforehand. I would split that up under food, eating out, medical, work, online, household, clothing, unknown, petrol, and others. And I would go through that. And this is all the items, the line items that we found on the banking statement. So obviously checkers would be food, quick spa, that would be food, P&A. Obviously we know that P&A is probably work related. That's stationery that was bought. And then there's a one that was uncertain. This one, the COCT. Now that might be City of Cape Town. It could be anything. So if you're uncertain, put that under the unknown column to say, okay, right, you know what, that is something that you have to question specifically on the expenses of the bank account. Optic Edge, if you do a simple Google search, you would see that that is a optometrist. So obviously that would fall under medical. And there also you could question the respondent on, you know what, if he does have a medical aid, why was it necessary for an additional payment of 11,000 Rand? Was it for him? Was it not for his girlfriend? Was it not for somebody else? That is definitely something that could be cross-examined and be clarified beforehand. Colcacho in Camps Bay, here we can see the probably the weekend away. In Camps Bay, there was eating out. There you could see all the eating out. So this is definitely a weekend away, and that would amount to luxuries, which is not necessary for the establishment of maintenance. You could definitely scrutinize and cross-examine the respondent on those, because that is not considered to be necessary expenses. Marcel's, that's ice cream parlor, Pick and Pay in Camps Bay, Waterfront, there's an expense probably for eating out. Key 4 is definitely a restaurant. V&A Waterfront, that might be parking or something like that, because it's only 10 Rand. Woolworths, that might be clothing. So Duraclad, there we said, okay, right, it might be household expenses. Those are all the things, and this is how I analyze it, and I put it in a column like that, and then I get to the totals, and I can see that, okay, right, you know what, an amount of 10,800 Rand was spent during that specific month. It was spent on food. There was an amount of 3,000 Rand used by eating out. There was 12,000 Rand on medical. If those amounts do not reflect on the J101 form or the forms that the respondent submits, then that is surely something that shows to an indiscrepancy, and that should raise red flags to say, but you know what, you've claimed on your expenses that you use 12,000 Rand for food. But your credit card only shows 10,000 Rand. Why do you think it is like that? Or the eating out, you know what, luxuries means that you know what, it's not necessary. Can you reduce that? Is it necessary for you to eat out? No, it's not. Then that surely amount could be used for maintenance, especially with regards to big medical expenses as well, to say, yes, okay, sure. Because remember, the respondent would give as much information on his deductions to make that, inflate that as much as possible for him to pay as little as possible maintenance, or so that the court could make an order to say, but you know what, his expenses are so high, you can only afford a little amount. One could look at this medical expense of 12,000 Rand and say, but you know what, this was a once-off expense, so that should not form part as a pattern of the future banking statements. So amount of 12,549 Rand would be available next month for maintenance. So let's work on that amount. Also, with regards to the income, here you can see it's 9,000, 30,000, 5,000. Now, these are all figures or real figures of a client, and it rings for me, it rings a bell, because it says that, you know what, a person would not get 9,000 Rand on the dot for a salary. So that money originated from somewhere. And you can also say that it's an internet bank transfer. So where did that money originate from? Where did that money come from? And that tells me that there might be a different account, or there might be a second account. So if this is the only account that was submitted, then that surely would raise a red flag to say, but there's definitely an additional account that that the respondent uses, and he did not declare that to the maintenance officer and or to the court. So the idea would be to use this as a tool to scrutinize banking statements, go through it line by line, and then compare that to the J101 form, the documents that were submitted. So if they claim a certain amount, that amount actually reflects on the banking statement, because that is one of the biggest way how they would hide the assets, and we'll get to that in a moment. So this is the recipe that you would do. You would go through the details of the J101 form, go through the details of the documents that were submitted. Remember now also, you bringing the application in terms of the first application, you would be cross-examined. You would have the respondent's attorney would have the opportunity, or the respondent would have the opportunity to cross-examine you on your documents and your statements. So make sure that all the amounts tie up. Go through the details. Now I'm explaining now how you could cross-examine the respondent on the details that he provides. So go through the J101 or the J107 form if he asks for a reduction, for example, and then he would submit all his details, his banking statements, his income, and his expenditure. He would submit to court and go through that line by line and scrutinize that. I also found that, you know what, if you have a J101 or J107 form and the amounts on there are fixed amounts, it's 500 Rand for this, it's 200 Rand for that was not well thought through, then that might raise a red flag to say, but you know what, this is all thumbsuck figures. It's not the correct figures. But if there is on the application form, it is, I spend towards food per month, I spend 3,942 Rand and 62 cents. That might very well mean that the applicant or the respondent took some time and they actually worked it out instead of just using thumbsuck figures. So next, what you would do, you go through the salary slip, make notes on the deductions. Also look at the deductions of garnishee orders on the salary slip to see if that is necessary deductions. Was it for personal loans? Was it for default judgments? What was that for? Because the court does have the power to actually suspend those garnishee orders because maintenance do take preference when it comes to deductions on payments on salary slips. Then next, go through the banking statement line by line and distinguish between items such as food, household, petrol, and entertainment. So it's not just a simple process. Take some time to go through that. Just do not accept what is in front of you as the gospel truth. Scrutinize that, go through that. Note the location of the deductions and the reasons therefore, because he might, or the respondent might, be on a weekend away in order to bring his means down so that he pays as little as much maintenance. Also then mark the discrepancies and question the other party. You would have the opportunity to question the other party on those discrepancies, such as, unnecessary expenses, deductions that you don't know of, things like luxury items bought on Takealot or on eBay, for example, big amounts like those. Those could all be used in cross-examination and you would be well within your right to ask those type of question. So now we've basically spoken about how to read through and how to delve through a normal banking statement, because that is important. Please do not discard that as just a lot of paperwork. Go through that. Put yourself in the mind of the respondent. Why is he spending? And seeing, because there's always a paper trail. See where it leads to. See the behavioral patterns. He buys flowers from a flower shop every Friday, and the flower's not for you, so it might be for his girlfriend. Also remember that once you go through these documents, through the banking statement, that you do not get angry. There's a difference between feelings, acting out of feelings, and acting out of facts. Because you might get angry because he can spend flowers on the girlfriend, but he can't spend 200 extra rand on the maintenance of the children. So be very careful that you do not get emotional while dealing through the banking statements. I've seen many of my clients go completely ballistic once they see and go through the banking statements of the respondent, especially in court, and they get confronted with that, and they say, "But you spend that money and you spend this money, but you can't spend that on maintenance." So keep the emotion out of that. The court is not a court of emotion; it's a court of law and it's a court of fact. So we distinguish between what is considered to be feelings and what is considered to be facts, and we work only with the facts. Next, I want to explain to you, just in short, I believe that there might be some other webinars from other people and from Mervyn and all those people that deals extensively with the completion of the financial disclosure form. And that is a form that is extensively used in the Gauteng region. It was done by giving a directive that the people practicing family law, especially when it comes to section or the Rule 43 and the Rule 58 interim orders, to be used as a baseline of both parties that had to fill that in order to compare apples with apples. Now, that is a brilliant idea. And that has been trickled down to the Western Cape, and we've been using that in the courts. And although it is not a necessary court document, it is not enforced by a J form like a J107 or something like that, we are pushing through the South African Law Reform Commission to have that included as a compulsory form that needs to be completed, because that would alleviate all these type of paperworks and people could actually just go through the financial disclosure form. And that is a brilliant form that could be used. We promote that form to be used. It is also available. I'll give you the download link in the next slide. So if we go through the financial disclosure form, what it looks like and what does it entail, we can actually see that the financial disclosure form, it is a simple form. It is a Word form. It is a simple Word document, but it was very well written and it was very well compiled. And it basically explains exactly what you need in court. So my suggestion would be that you download this form. It is quite a lengthy page. It's 19 pages. It's a 19-page document. But these are all the questions that you could ask in court. And what happens quite often is that some of the attorneys, once I request my opposing attorney to complete that form, to complete the financial disclosure form, they simply just refuse. They say, but you know what, we're in the Western Cape, it's not compulsory for us to do. So I would then go to court and I would start off with doing my cross-examination, and I would go through that form. I would use that form and I would go through that form step by step in order to place everything that is on that form. I would place that on record in the maintenance inquiry. And the court cannot stop you from doing so. And by that way, you can actually force the person to divulge all the information that is needed. That just gives you more structure on how to ask and how to get all the information out. So what I'm just going to run through it very briefly. Obviously, it contains some biographical personal details, the identity numbers, the number of children, the names of the children. Those are all just the normal information that is needed. Financial details. Once we come to the financial details, the immovable property, you get the property address, you get if the property is mortgaged, for what amount was it mortgaged, what bond is still outstanding. These are all information that speaks to the means of the respondent. Also, if it's a joint property, what is your total equity in the property? So if you own half of the property, what is your half worth? And then you get the total value of your interest in the property, or from the respondent, what is his interest of the property. Obviously, what you could also get there is to get the valuations of the property, the address of the property. That would be self-explanatory. And all the other properties that you might have, because they might have a holiday home, which is not completely divulged, which has been paid up, and they only use that for holidays. That forms part of his asset base and part of his means. 2.4, details of all investments, including shares, bonds, if they do have cryptocurrency. Unfortunately, at this stage, we do not have the facility to request a subpoena from the companies dealing with cryptocurrency to divulge that information. So there is legislation in the pipeline regarding that, but at this stage, we cannot do that. But if he does have investments, for example, at Discovery or Liberty, then that information could be obtained. So as well for life insurance or for endowment policies, because most of these policies would have a cash value that could be used for maintenance. All money is owed to you in excess of 2,000 Rand. If you loan out for family and friends and they need to pay you back, obviously you could get an attachment order on that debts as well in case when there is enforcement of the maintenance order. These are information. Remember now, this document is so comprehensive, and all the information in this document could be used not only for now, for this application, but also for future reference, for references if you want to, if it defaults and you want to enforce the maintenance order. Details of personal belongings with more than 5,000 Rand. If he has one of these fancy portraits or something like that, that is so special and it's worth 50,000 Rand, that has an asset value, that has got a value attached to it, and that could be sold. The court could actually make a ruling regarding that to say that could be sold in order to pay maintenance. So that's important to have all this. So you could ask the respondent during cross-examination, you know what, sir, you know what, your personal property that is more than 5,000 Rand, something like in collections, you know, pictures or jewelry, what big pieces of jewelry do you have? What are the amounts? What is the valuation of that? And you can all make a note, just make a note of that, because that all forms part of the asset base. And then you would have the total values of the personal assets of the respondent. Then we come to the liabilities. It is excluding liabilities as already shown, like in overdrawn accounts or mortgage payments or loans. But it should include all that money that is owed on credit cards and store cards, like in retail cards, your furniture shops, and so forth, as well as bank loans or any other financial agreements, such as vehicle agreements. Those all needs to be completed in this portion here. And you could ask the maintenance officer to assist you to obtain a ITC report. They could instruct, the maintenance officer could instruct the maintenance investigator to get a detailed credit report on the respondent to confirm what he said, that it is actually the truth and correct. Financial instruments, business assets and directorship. If he does have a company, then obviously you are well within your rights to ask for financial statements. These are the questions that you could ask him then under oath in court or in front of the maintenance officer, or you could actually, if you are an attorney or a mediator, by request of the opposing party, to complete this form. And you can tell them that, you know what, if you do not complete this form, then we will need to lead oral evidence in order to establish all those type of information. Next, also something that is interesting or that should be questioned is the pension interest. Get the details of the pension fund, because there could be an attachment in terms of the Solar versus Maintenance court in Weinberg, that pension could also be attached for non-payment of maintenance. So if you have all these details ready now, then you would not have any trouble in the future if there is need for an enforcement of a maintenance order, that you have all those details. So if you can get these details now under oath, then you should be well away. Other assets, yes. Commodities, shares in business schemes or shares in gold, those could all be included there. Income based on employment, that is the payslip. You could ask for the IRP5 forms to establish, you know, what was his gross income the last couple of financial years, in order to say, right, you know what, how much did he pay for income tax and how much did he pay for the UIF. This is all information that should be readily available on the payslip. Income from investments. Ask the respondent, you know what, do you have any investments? Do you have any dividends or interest, or even rental income? Do you rent out the little hooky at the back? Or you have a Airbnb, so you rent out two rooms in your house, or a separate granny flat? What is the total income that you get from that? That is all questions that could be asked, and it's usually we forget about these. Income from self-employment, partnership. Yes, if he's self-employed, he works for himself, you can ask for the financial statements, as well as if he's in a partnership, you could also ask for the partnership agreement to see what is the distribution or the calculation of partnership, the shares of the partners, how much do they each get? And also, what is the income that was received during the past financial year? And sometimes they also ask what is the estimated income for the next 12 months, in order to get that information to court to make an informed assessment regarding the means of the respondent for maintenance purposes. From state benefits, yes, state pension, child or SASSA grants. This could be all included in that portion there, and then any other income that could be included there. And this is just a calculation. It's quite self-explanatory, where you could work out what should be needed. Like I said, we have Advocate Raters adapted this document in order to also include the maintenance requirements, and this could be completed and could be used and filled in. Now, this could very well replace the J101 form or the J107 form. If you are the first-time applicant using this, it might be a good idea as well. Even if you fill in the necessary documents and you use the financial disclosure form or the financial disclosure affidavit as a supplementary document together with your application. The rest of the document is quite explanatory. I'm not going through that in very much or further detail. Like I said, it's quite explanatory. That is basically the financial disclosure form. So what is it used for? Yes, obviously it's used to compare apples to apples. And the ideal would be that both parties fill this in order to evaluate what is fair and equitable with regards to their means in order to establish what amount needs to be paid for maintenance. It is not compulsory. Like I said, it's not compulsory because it is not a prescribed form yet. We are advocating towards that. And what happens if the other party refuses? If the other party refuses that, then you would have the opportunity in court to, by way of cross-examination, to go through that form. And I urge you to print out the form, go through the form, and complete the form in court, because nothing prevents you of going through that form step by step and getting all that information which is contained on that form. The document is available for download. I've created a QR code that you can scan, or there is also a website or where you can download it. The download there would be bit.ly/3NDWHG9. That is the way what you can just type in the URL in your web browser, and you could download the form in Word format so that you can alter the document and you can actually fill in the document online. So tips on type of questions that could be asked: have your notes, just a couple of general tips, have your notes ready prior to when you make the inquiry. Go through the banking statements and get all your facts ready. Get all your questions that you want to ask. All those that you're uncertain of, mark that in highlighters. Some of my files look like a Christmas tree with all the colors, the highlighters that I use. And that is the way that you scrutinize and you go through all the documents. Then direct your questions very chronologically. Start off with the income, start off with a salary slip. Ask about the income. First of all, don't jump around. Start off with the income. This is the income, all the questions. Then the deductions on the salary slip. What are the deductions? Why was it necessary? Then go through the banking statement, scrutinize all the banking statements, and then lastly, go through all the questions in the financial disclosure affidavit, and then bring together everything, linking that up with what has been asked for and what has been said in the initial application, the J101 or the J107 form. Common ways that people hide the documents or hide their income or assets would be that they don't give bank accounts, or they just say that they don't have bank accounts, or they hide the bank accounts, or the income gets paid into a different bank account, the bank account of the girlfriend or the other family member, or the investments. They conveniently forget that they've got a 500,000 Rand in a Liberty or an Old Mutual investment somewhere, from a previous pension fund or something like that. They conveniently forget that. Increase in deductions directly from the salary. Yes, I've seen that quite a lot, where people increase their pension benefits or the provident fund benefits. The HR allows you for a certain percentage, and then they increase that willingly. For example, let me use the example that I had. The employee, in terms of the employment contract, it said that he is allowed to, as a minimum, he should pay towards a provident fund 10%, for example. And what he did is he increased that to 25%. So 25% of his salary was deducted. And that would mean that his disposable income was so little. And that was the basis that he said, but you know what, he can't pay maintenance because he does not earn enough. Only upon scrutinization thereof, we found that, in terms of his employment contract, he was only, the minimum that he should pay was 10% and not 25%. So those are things that you should be very wary about. You should scrutinize that, go through it. You should be the detective. You should get all that information, get that patterns, see the way that he thinks. What also happens is that his lifestyle does not match his income or his expenditure, or his social media profile tells something different. There's nothing wrong with, I wouldn't call it stalking, but I would say perusing the person on social media to see, if he splashes photos of his new girlfriend with his new car, keep those photos, because those could all be presented to court to say, but this is the lifestyle that you portray. Where did the money come from to buying that car? Where did you get that information? Where did you get that car? Who pays for it? Who pays for the insurance? Social media nowadays could be to our benefit, or could be to the benefit of the claimants, Very much so. So get all that information. If you do not have access there to, you can actually ask somebody else that might be friend of his to get all that information on social media. So what would happen if you know that the respondent is lying? He does not have that. Or during the process with your cross-examination, that you find out, oh, you know what, this is a red flag. I want more information, or I suspect that he has other bank accounts as well. During a Section 7 investigation, now that is just even before the formal Section 6 inquiry, then the maintenance officer could instruct the maintenance investigator to do a complete ITC check. That should be done actually as a default. Unfortunately, they do not have the time and the capacity and the money to do that at each and every case. But yes, the maintenance investigator via the maintenance officer could get all the information, gather in the information like the ITC report, the e-natus, what cars are registered on his name, the when deed is that they use for property searches, what property is linked to his name. All the banks could be subpoenaed, and also to get affidavits from all the people that they have financial dealings with. They could also be subpoenaed. For example, he has an account at a furniture shop. The maintenance investigator could, if instructed so by the maintenance officer, request that document that he filled in, the application for getting credit at a furniture store to buy that big screen TV. So it might be worthwhile to ask the maintenance investigator or the maintenance officer to get that application. You want the application, because on the application he would give all the information. He would inflate his income so much in order to buy that specific item, that new car or that new TV. So if you can get hold of that application form, then that might give you an indication of what is his true income, because he would portray it in such a manner so that he actually qualifies for the for that specific purchase. In terms of Section 8, that could also be used. The maintenance officer then could request the court to subpoena people. That could be the HR manager, like I've done with the Provident Fund case. During the trial, in terms of Section 9, the maintenance officer could request the court to subpoena any person to bring any document to court that is necessary for this financial inquiry to be held. Even during when you do the cross-examination and you find out, and it leads you to think that some information might be necessary, you could ask the court, as the court pleases your worship, we request that this person be subpoenaed, the auditor of the respondent, of his company, be subpoenaed to bring the annual financial statements to court. And then you ask and you make the request directly to court, and the court has to abide by that and to address that issue, because that is something that you've asked to court in an open court while it was recorded. And if the magistrate just then point blank refuses, then you would definitely have recourse once the matter goes on appeal or review. That a judge listening to that recording or the transcript thereof might say, but you know what, the magistrate actually erred and he did not act judicially correct in granting the subpoena, because that is necessary. The magistrate always also has an active role to play in order to establish what is the means of the parties to get to a fair and equitable maintenance amount. Then lastly, some practical tips. Do not be intimidated by the maintenance officer, the other attorney, the opposing attorney, or even the magistrate. They are all there, specifically the maintenance officer, the personnel, the maintenance clerk, as well as the magistrate, to assist even if they are represented. I'm thinking of, there's a couple of cases, Vedavatu, and there's a couple of cases dealing with that, where it says that the magistrate and the maintenance officer, they do play an active part in establishing what amount of maintenance should be paid. So it is not an adversarial process. It's not a criminal process. It's not a civil process. It's sui generis. It's unique in nature. And there is an active role that the magistrate and the maintenance officer needs to play during court proceedings and during the Section 6 the informal inquiry in establishing the needs and the means for maintenance. So you are well within your rights to go through that document, to scrutinize each and every item, line item on the banking statement or the financial disclosure affidavit or the financial disclosure form, to get that on record in order to establish what amount could be paid for maintenance. Another tip is to create a plan. Create a plan to systematically go through all the info. Don't just start haphazard and go here and there and all over the show. Come prepared, have all your documents ready, and come with a plan on how you would go through that and scrutinize each and every document presented to court. Lastly, do not get discouraged during the inquiry because it seems like a daunting task. It's so much that you have to go through. Remember that you're doing it for your child. It is for the benefit of the children. It's in the best interest of the child that you go through this process. And insist on proof. If they make an allegation, the golden rule of evidence is someone that alleges something, someone that says something needs to prove that and have the backing to prove that up. That is, in short, the practical tips on how to present and to interpret the documents during a Section 6 or 10 inquiry. We're coming to the end of our session. It was quite a long session today. I hope you found that insightful. If you did, please drop us a line on info@lunchandlearn.org.za with your comments, with your suggestions. If you need more information, you're most welcome also to drop us an email and just chat with us and say what you found beneficial or not. My name is Eugene Opperman. I'm a family and law practitioner. I've been doing so for the past 23 years. I'm very passionate about maintenance. My practice evolves mainly around divorces, maintenance matters, domestic violence, and then matters pertaining to child rights. It was great fun having you guys here and presenting this webinar, and we'll see you next week, same time, same place. And I wish that you have a stunning afternoon further ahead. Thank you so much for listening.